All right, good evening, everyone. We're going to get going here. Today is Monday, April 29, and we are here to take up final budget adoption for the fiscal year 24-25 budget. First order of business, as always, the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, next on the agenda is the land acknowledgement statement, which I will read. The town of South Kingstown pays homage to the indigenous people and land on which the town is now located. Let this acknowledgement serve as a reminder of our ongoing efforts to recognize, honor, reconcile, and partner with the Narragansett tribe whose land and water we benefit from today. Next, we have the roll call.
Council President McEntee?
Here.
Council Vice President Marin?
Here.
Council Member Bergner?
Here.
Council Member Alley?
Here.
Council Member Sweet?
Here.
All members are present.
All right, thank you, Susan. All right, that's going to bring us to the public hearing tonight relative to adoption of the Town Council's final fiscal year 24-25 budget as shown in Exhibit 1. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Jim Manny, Town Manager.
Thank you. Good evening. As you stated, tonight is the final budget hearing for the 24-25 proposed budget. We have a 27-page document here that Brian Sylvia has worked on for quite a while. It's a little different than what we've been presenting all along. The first 17 pages of this are pretty much the same, and then it'll go to the amendments and what proposed tax rate is. And what I would tell you is there are some things in here that I'll just give you the real high-level view on it before I turn over to Brian. He's going to get into it in detail. But first, let's go to page 3 on this, which is, so I know I've read this a couple of times, but it's important that if people that are tuning in for the first time hear what we're doing. So this is the 24-25 budget calendar. So in the month of April, on Monday the 15th was public hearing number 1, which included the municipal budget and the school department operating budget. On Wednesday the 17th was public hearing number 2. It was also on the municipal budget and the school department operating budget. On April 22nd at 4 p.m. was the deadline to submit petitions for revisions to the preliminary budget. We had one resident who did take a petition but did not meet the signatures, and so that we don't have any to date. On the 29th is consideration of, which is tonight, the consideration of petitions and adoption of the final operation budget during a regular session. We still have some dates in the future. In May, on Monday the 13th, would be a 4 p.m. deadline for submissions of final petitions for the referendum, 200 signatures required. On the 16th, May 16th, a deadline for petition signatures to be verified by the Board of Canvassers. Then we go into June. On June 4th, the possible budget referendum would be on a Tuesday following the first Saturday. We had one last year. Unknown if we'd have another one this year. And on June 14th, the town assessor sets the tax rate for the fiscal year 24-25. Go to page 4. These are some of the highlights we've talked about the last 2 budget meetings. Some of this could change this evening based on some new numbers that came in very recently over the weekend, on Friday, and then today as well. And the finance director will go over those numbers. So right now, the proposed tax levy increase is 1.29%, which in and of itself is a very good number considering where we started. Brought it down from 1.7 to 1.29, and possibly could go lower this evening based on whatever policy decision you make on the new numbers that came in the revenue side of things. If you keep it at 1.29%, the tax rate would go to $11.13 from $11.05, which was the tax rate from 23-24 fiscal year. The net property taxes needed fiscal year 25 proposed was $76,997,255, of which $20,703,736 or 26.89%, is related to the town operations. $56,293,519, or 73.11%, is related to the school department operations. All funds budgeted were up $2,230,360, or 2.12%, compared to fiscal year 23-24 adopted budget. So fiscal year 2025 would be, the total budget would be $107,244,335 versus the fiscal year 24, $105,013,975. It is noted that the school department's local appropriation is level funded this year as from the prior fiscal year, which that number again is $55,994,773. Now I'll just give you a very brief overview so that as Director of Finance is going through this presentation, you can hone in on some of the pages of importance that I'll just explain to him real quick so you can concentrate on them when they come up. On page 20, we'd like you to pay attention to that one when that comes up, because the taxable property went up approximately $6 million since March of this year. So what does that mean? It means that we would raise out of that $6 million approximately that the town has growth, which is higher than what was anticipated. That would result in a $70,000 increase in taxes brought to the town as revenue. So we know that through previous meetings we've had that every $68,000 saved could result in a 1 cent reduction in the property tax. So that would be a decision that you would make this evening if you wanted to come down 1 cent right off that alone, that growth that the town had in the past 3 months. If you look at page 21, you'll see those numbers as they stand right now, where the top box was $11.13, the proposed tax rate, but Brian Sylvia, the bottom part was $11.12, assuming that you would take that 1 cent off from the $70,000 increase in tax revenue. If you go to page 22, there's an amendment to the budget. The St. Vincent de Paul, St. Francis of Assisi had requested allocation on the HSOA grants that we did not give them. It was negotiated with the solicitor. At the last meeting, it was $2,000 to $5,000 was authorized in the negotiation that the solicitor would have with St. Vincent de Paul, St. Francis of Assisi. It was negotiated through both of them that it would be $4,000. The town has not spent $1,950 that we had allocated to HSOA. That's the Human Services Outside Agencies, HSOA. And so therefore, we would need an additional $2,050, which is an amendment to the budget, which would come out of the budget. So $1,950 on hand, $2,050 we need, comes out to $4,000. The next page is 23, 24, 25. Real quick, these are the tangible personal property reimbursements we're getting from the state of Rhode Island. As we know, a law was passed by the General Assembly exempting the first $50,000 in tangible personal property for businesses. That was the bulk of the number we have here in town, is many of these businesses don't have more than $50,000. So it was a big write-off for them, saved them a lot of money, but also it reduced the revenue this town could get by $254,000 approximately. The exact number was $253,980. The state of Rhode Island has since reimbursed us this money. This was revenue we had not counted on because we didn't know what the formula would be or exactly what the town would get. So once again, you get $70,000 from the growth that the town experienced. You have another $253,980 that we got back from tangible personal property from the state. And then the final number, if you go on page 26, There's a additional revenue to be realized with the allowance and abatements and overlay on Section 2. So what does that mean? The collection rate that the town operates on is we would collect approximately 98% of the tax levy. The tax levy is 77.2 million, is that right?
Correct.
All right. So basically, if you use this in like common sense language, so we would expect to bring in 98% of the levy that we have sent to the property owners. So, but that number has since gone up. It's no longer 98% that we expect to collect, it's 98.6%. And the reason for that is that, talking to Brian today, the two areas that we had the most delinquent taxes were the motor vehicle tax and the personal property,
Tangible.
what's that?
Tangible.
Tangible, I just forgot it. But that has since gone down now, so we now have a 98.6 rate that we are collecting, so which would raise an additional $423,714. So the bottom line is, on the two numbers, additional revenue from the state's tangible tax reimbursement is $253,980. We got that. And additional revenue to be realized with the allowance of abatements and overlay, the change in the collection rate, is $423,714. So the last page Brian will go over is, these are different scenarios that the town council could consider if they want to apply this additional revenue that we got towards our tax rate. It starts at the 1112 on the top, which is the first one, and then it would go all the way down to 1102 if we used every penny of that $677,694. So that's just a brief overview. Brian Sylvia will get into the more details of it now.
Thank you, Jim. So circling back to page 5, and I'm going to go relatively quickly on the first 17 pages. As Jim said, this is what's been adopted by the council, what we've had public hearings on twice. No change to this data. It is what's in front of the council tonight, so we'll go through it, and please feel free to stop with any questions. But again, we've had these numbers, so no changes to these pages, so we'll just go a quick overview. On page 5, this is the property tax information. You'll see, again, total property tax need, $76,997,255. That is, as noted previously by Jim, 26.89% related to town and 73.11% related to school. Overall, this is a levy increase of 1.29%. And the rate to support this tax would be, this revenue rather, would be $11.13. On the all funds budgeted, this is all operating funds that receive a budget within the town of South Kingston. What is being proposed is $107,244,335. That's an increase of 2.12% over the prior year. On general fund, revenue and expenses, they are proposed for an increase of 5.56% to $32,539,245, both on the revenue and expense for the general fund. The next slide is a similar way to, same information, but a different way to slice the information up, where this is by the various types of expenses and the various revenues. But once again, same numbers, just way to slice it a different way. But again, the general fund is proposed for an increase of $1,714,327 increase at 5.56% over the prior year. On the school fund currently within the preliminary adopted is proposed at $62,635,680. The departments since that time have reduced their budget to a department request of $62,458,664. That is a reduction of $177,015, or a reduction of 0.28%. PDOB, or thank you, PCO office. Peacedale office is proposed at $107,959, which is an increase of $136.26, $1,326 or 1.24%. Senior services is proposed for a decrease of $21,999. That is overall a decrease of 3.01%, and the request or the preliminary budget currently is at $707,842. Neighborhood Guild is currently adopted at preliminary for $960,722. That's an increase of $87,562. The Recreation Center has a preliminary budget currently of $784,717. That's an increase of $75,504 over the current year. Debt Service Fund has a preliminary adopted budget of $1,797,772. That is an overall decrease of $117,614. The Water Enterprise Fund has a preliminary adopted budget of $1,329,151, which is an increase of $65,500 over the prior fiscal year. Wastewater Enterprise Fund has a preliminary adopted budget currently of $5,344,942, which is a proposed increase of $276,711. And finally, of the funds, Solid Waste Enterprise Fund has a preliminary adopted of $1,036,306, which is a proposed increase of $149,044. Again, as noted by Jim, here are some possible or potential amendments within the budget. The first being, as noted previously, the school department. The school department has amended their budget since the council took action on the budget. This is they're to bring the budgets in line from what they have since adopted versus what the town has currently adopted in the preliminary would require a reduction of $177,016. This amendment would bring the school department's budget in line with their budget for fiscal year 2024, with the primarily related to the reduction in use of fund balance on revenue and a reduction of capital outlay on the expenditures. No change to the town's tax transfer to education is being considered as part of this amendment. Next, as noted previously by Jim, overall, I'm going to take you through a few numbers on this because we do have some moving parts. Overall, if you noticed, just the first grade bold subtotal line, that total taxable property, overall, that's up $14 million. That's a large increase. The assessor's office has been working hard down there. And then the other number of note is the exemptions that jumped up nearly $8 million. That's going to be, again, as Jim noted earlier, that's going to be related to, now we're reflective of the exemption related to the tangible exemption for tangible taxes less $50,000. So you're seeing both, the net result is overall, the net taxable property is up just under $6.4 million. $6,396,383. This would result in current year tax revenue an increase of $68,198, just under $70,000. And again, the overall growth now for the year is up 0.66% and to an increase of $45 million, or $45.5 million. So on this slide, as Jim had noted, the top portion is what was adopted within the preliminary budget. There you'll see the what's within the budget right now for current year tax revenue, the $75,680,556. That's one thing I wanted to note in this. So in addition to on the bottom of changing it by 1 cent, you'll see that because of the increase in the taxable property, we're also increasing the taxable budgeted tax revenue by $2,050. And that is related to, again, the other amendment for the, I got it on the next page. It's actually going to be noted on the next page. But this is increasing the revenue by the tax revenue at no change or no cost to taxpayers for the $2,050, which is, again, for St. Vincent de Paul and St. Francis Assisi. So on this slide, you'll see, again, what's in the preliminary budget at the top. What's currently adopted within the preliminary is $32,539,243. We're increasing the budget by that $2,050. So at the bottom, you'll see now it would be $32,541,293. And the net result of this is, again, revenue would be going up by the $250. The $2,050. That would be going towards the St. Vincent de Paul, St. Francis Assisi, in addition to the remaining balance in the human services and outside agencies of $1,950 to achieve the goal of the $4,000.
All right, Brian, I want to ask
Yes.
a few questions here. Kind of blended Amendment 2 and Amendment 3
Yeah.
together here. I want to slow it down.
Yep.
Amendment 2 is to account for the $250 intangible personal property reimbursement from the state. That would be Amendment 2.
2 is just our tax assessment going up. So so the first one was really the school department, bringing them in line. The second one would, and again, you can take them in any order. It really, this is how I'm presenting them, but how I have it on here is, again, the assessed value is going up, which would enable, if the council so chooses, reducing the rate by 1,000 and increasing the budget by 2,050 to achieve the 4,000. So those would be the first
So
two.
is that all Amendment 2?
It can be. You can group them.
All right, the 4,000 looks like it's Amendment 3.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead, keep
Okay.
going here.
I did that one. So, tangible tax legislation. So I just gave a little more verbiage. We've talked about this in the past, but just to give a little more information. The new legislation at the state provides a $50,000 exemption to all tangible tax accounts beginning in fiscal year 24-25. Those with more than $50,000 worth of tangible assets would have to pay the tax on assets above $50,000, but would still receive an equal amount of tax relief. Since the tangible tax is a municipal tax level tax rather than state one, the state will reimburse each city, town, or fire district annually for those lost revenue, just as it has done with the revenue lost through the motor vehicle phase-out. We have gotten word too, this reimbursement would happen in September of each year. So we do have a time frame on when we would be receiving this reimbursement, and the state has set aside, I believe it was $58 million within their budget to accommodate the reimbursements on the tangible reimbursement. And again, the breakdown of that is the town is anticipating receiving $253,980. The tax assessor has worked very hard on this. I know she's worked with other assessors. This is a new program this year. So I know she's worked with other assessors, making sure everyone's on the same page and is filing this properly and in a similar manner. So we're very confident this is our number and this is what we will be receiving from the state. And finally, at the top of this page, the top portion, this is what you saw after this is where the rate is at 1112. So this is basically after what was noted as Amendment 2. After the increase in assessments, you'll see the levy at 1.29%, the overlay and abatements at 1.5 million, and the overall tax within the budget of $75,682,000. Within the bottom portion, we did a bit of a deep dive on tax collections and noted that within the recent years, the tax revenue collection rate has really been increasing. And it really seems to correlate with, again, the motor vehicle phase out with the state, which has been very difficult to collect. It was not timely. We had a lot of instances where people would pay their motor vehicle tax every other year, like when the registration would come due, so they weren't timely. Same with tangible tax. It's a very difficult tax to collect. So we think that's a large part of it. And also, the economy has been strong. But we've certainly noted that the collection rate has been on the rise, and it correlated with, again, 2018, when the motor vehicle phase-out began. So we feel comfortable at this time saying the collection rate could be set at 98.55%, which would be an overall, reduce the levy need of the town by $423,714. So that would be altering the collection rate from 98% to 98.55%. And this is the summary of really the last two. So again, we're anticipating receiving $253,980 associated with the state's tangible reimbursement, and the funds related to increasing the collection rate to 98.55 would be $423,714. So total of additional revenue sources is $677,694. We then provided some possible uses of the revenue sources, one being increasing contingencies within the operating budget associated with pending and unknown contractual obligations of the town. Really, this would be 1A. If by chance the contractual obligations are settled and they are exceeding what's within the budget, because we don't have a reserve, the next logical move would be coming back to the council and requesting further use of fund balance to offset those additional costs. So this, really 1 and 2 are in anticipation of needing potentially additional funds related to contractual obligations. The third being, obviously, we've had a lot of discussions on this, increasing funding to the debt service fund to offset future potential debt obligations. And obviously, finally, an option is reducing the proposed tax rate of the town for fiscal year 24-25. And as noted by Jim, this will take you down, this last slide will take you down on what the impact will be for whichever rate that is selected, kind of a menu of what you can do with that $677,000.
All right, thank you, Brian. Can we go back to amendment number 2?
Absolutely.
I'm just not following that amendment.
Okay.
I got 1, 3, 4, and 5 down. I'm trying to understand what amendment 2 is.
Okay. So Amendment 2 it's tied to, well, no, Amendment 2 is related to the fact that assessments have gone up.
Yep.
So because assessments are going up, we have the ability to raise the, to lower the tax rate, and also in the process, raise $2,050. And I understand what you're saying. The 2 and 3 are a little blended because the $2,050 is within 2, and obviously that's part of Amendment 3 also, as part of the 4,000. So they are blurred a little bit, I understand that. But Amendment 2 is essentially utilizing the funds that were realized by the increase in assessed value. So it would be lowering the rate by 1 cent and increasing the tax revenue budget by $2,050.
All right, so amendment 2 is associated with the growth of the tax base that has given us $70,000 in revenue that we didn't account for a month ago here?
We did not have, but yes,
Okay.
correct.
So that's that amendment. All right, I got a few questions, or if anyone wants to, just gonna dive in. All right, about a month ago or 2 months ago, when we had the preliminary budget adoption, we anticipated about $2.4 million in budget surplus, is that correct?
That's correct.
So from that time to now, it looks like there's revenues that are coming in better than projected of another 700,000-ish?
I can't really commingle the two, but 2 different fiscal years. So one, we're
Okay.
talking about how we're closing out the current fiscal year 24
Yeah.
projections, and one is, obviously, same pot of money overall, I understand, but 2 different fiscal years, yes. And then the other revenues that we're talking about tonight, those are increased revenue projections for the next fiscal year
Okay.
24-25.
Okay. So those potentially budget surplus in a future year.
Yes,
So we're still looking at 2.4 million budget surplus for the year we're currently in.
correct.
And as of now, looking at least 700,000 budget surplus for the following year,
Correct.
but likely more.
Well, I don't want to call it budget surplus. Currently unaccounted for. It's not within the budget.
Okay. All right, and this budget accounts for an undesignated fund balance transfer of 1.7 million.
I'm sorry?
Use from the undesignated fund
Oh,
balance.
yes, I'm sorry,
Applied toward
yes.
the budget of 1.7 million.
That's correct.
So leaving about an increase of 700,000 in the undesignated fund balance after the usage of that because of the $2.4 million budget surplus.
That's correct. And just to, so currently what is in the budget for use of fund balance is $1,793,608.
All right. Any other questions, thoughts? So, Brian, if we were to, these revenues that apply to a future year that we're talking about here, these amendments that we're considering, that allows us to reduce the tax rate because we are not reliant on taxpayers to have to pay more because we know that these additional revenues are there, allowing us not to have to tap into that.
One is an additional revenue source. We weren't sure at the time, which it actually worked out. Again, we're very early in terms of the state and budget adoption process. So I think the early projections when we first transmitted the budget over to you, we had a very, very low number. We weren't sure of the process, which I'm glad we waited and left the tangible reimbursement separate and outside until we knew what the number. So we would have been before you anyway, changing that drastically because we were off. Well, we didn't understand the process. We weren't sure of the process yet. But yes, we have a new revenue source in terms of the tangible reimbursement, and we're anticipating additional revenue because of the increased collection rate.
And we anticipate better collection rates going forward because of this new state statute.
Yes and no. That's a good point. I should question one thing on that. Yes, I absolutely think we are going to be continuing to go forward. The one thing I would caution, which will impact next year, anytime there's a reval year, you have a lot more appeals, and there are a lot more abatements. So that is, the reval years, it's good to keep, lower the collection rate a little bit because you're going to have a lot of appeals, people appealing the assessments related to the reval. But short of the reval years, yes.
Makes sense. All right. So this worked out great, right? This is all good news?
Good news.
Any thoughts?
I'm delighted. I am happier about taxes tonight than I have ever imagined that I would be, Brian. So thank you very much. And I really appreciate the process that that I hear a lot of feedback. Can you guys turn off your?
Sorry.
I really appreciate the process, the very careful and methodical and extremely conservative and cautious approach that I see you take, Brian, under Jim's direction and also direction from the council, because keeping our costs down is really important. But the worst thing, in my opinion, is to have numbers come back and you're surprised that they've gone up. So I'm really thankful that these numbers have, that we have this great opportunity. And I thank you for being a very cautious and methodical team here. And of course, everybody up here also. So thank you.
Brian, with regard to page 27, if I can ask you a couple of questions.
Absolutely.
Where you just left off about a revaluation year. And I think at our last regular meeting, we talked about the fact that Vision is going to be going in and reevaluating.
Correct.
On these proposed tax rates that you've got for us, essentially as a menu to choose from, if the council goes with the 11.05 mill rate, is that going to be based on what the taxpayer has as their assessment of this year, or is that going to be a new assessment as of December 31st, 24?
No, the next reval will go in as of 12/31/2024. So the next budget's a fiscal year 26 budget. This is a
Okay.
non-reval year.
All right, so the assessed value of my house
Yes,
is going to be the same for this coming fiscal year as it was last?
unless you did an addition.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
Yeah, trust
Yes.
me, I
Yeah.
did. And all the way at the bottom, you've got 11.02, which I assume is the floor that you and Jim have discussed. Does that take into account, like, can we go that low and still hit all of the marks that you've got here in the 5 amendments?
Yes, this is accounting, so, the First Amendment, there's no tax impact to the town, that is just restructuring the school's budget, nothing to do with the tax transfer. The second one is growth of the town, the tax base increased, we were able to lower it 1 cent and raise the $2,050. The third one, they're blended, I'm forgetting. Oh, yes, so again, no impact on the tax rate for that. And the fourth and fifth are additional revenue sources, so no impact in that regard.
If I could just add to that question. So we are in negotiations with
Yes.
3 of the unions this year, and unknown how that's going to turn out. We're trying to be fair to the employees and fair to the town, obviously. So we would like some little cushion. So the 1105 would be the staff recommendation, but of course, you're the council, you can do whatever you want. But if we do the 1105, you've level funded what you did last year, and you leave a cushion for the staff to negotiate in good faith of about $200,000.
So essentially, no tax increase then for this year? Is that what we're?
If you choose the
If we
1105
choose
and
the
apply the
1105.
additional revenue that came in, then it would be level than what the tax rate was last year.
Right, and then we would still have over 200,000 as a cushion for the negotiations that we have coming up with the 3 different unions.
That's correct.
Okay.
So every year in June, you come back and you tell us what the final tax rate is. There is still a potential that we could go below 11.05, right? Last year, you came back, I don't know, it was a couple of cents.
Yes,
Three-
last year, we came
three-
back with a recommendation, we could lower it 2 more cents than
Yep.
what it was.
So there's, thank you. There's still the potential from whatever happens between now and that meeting in June, that the rate could even go even lower. Okay.
Absolutely.
And so one of the recommendations that you had, possible uses of the additional revenue sources included contingencies for contractual obligations, reduction of the reliance of the use of fund balance to balance the operating budget. What do you mean there?
Reducing, so taking some of the fund, that 677, and reducing the amount that is going to be used by fund balance to balance the budget. So that 1,793,000, lowering that amount.
And then debt service fund to offset any potential future debt obligations. And then the fourth one is to reduce the tax rate to the town. That would make sense. Okay. Is there any pro or con to doing the reduction of the reliance on the fund balance? I don't see one, but I didn't know if I was missing something.
It's really the choice of the council. Again, if contracts are settled and it's beyond what has been set aside within this budget, we'd have to come back before the council for additional funds, and that would come from likely the fund balance. So if some funds weren't put into, say, a contingency account for the contracts, the next best thing would be reducing the use of fund balance, and we'd have to come back and request them if needed, when needed. So they're kind of interchangeable, 1 and 2 there.
I feel like just starting at the 1105 really makes sense. I mean, if you go out in the community and you hear from people, their very small COLA doesn't cover the expenses, the cost of groceries, the cost of utilities. So this is really helpful to people who are worried about their pocketbooks. And, it's just a little bit. But for them, it always is much bigger decisions. I always go back to the things that resonate with me. And even in this budget cycle, we heard from human service agencies, there's people in our community who didn't have a functional sink, who were using the shower. Those are real people. They're probably invisible to all of us. They're not like us who might be able to drive here and not worry about gas. we really need to be sensitive that those people live in our community, want to remain in our community. Those agencies do great work to help them stay healthy in their home. But we never, as elected officials, should lose sight when we drive around in beautiful neighborhoods that there's other people struggling. So I appreciate the recognition, and that's why I fight so hard for people to be able to afford to live here. We have to pay attention to the very unseen people. That's all.
Jim, when do you anticipate having the contractual negotiations done? Is that before the end of this fiscal year?
Yes, we're in the process now with two unions, International Association of Firefighters, the Municipal Employees, NEA, or MEA, depending on how you phrase it. And then we have one more, Council 94, coming up. So, but to answer the question is yes, we hope to wrap all these up within a few months.
So we'll know the number from the collective bargaining, and we'll know the final numbers on the taxes before June 30 anyway.
Well, I don't know if we'll have the contracts wrapped up by June 30th. To be close, but our goal is to get them done as quickly as possible. But sometimes they take several months instead of a couple of months. There's just one item I'd like to add to this. This is a good budget. This is for us to possibly get that low where we're level is really extraordinary. When you see the challenges that everyone has with balancing these budgets and the cost and the inflation that drives up everything from asphalt to gas to everything that the town uses. So the directors have worked very hard to keep this lean at your, you want it to run lean. We're running as lean as we can get. And having a 0% increase would be a great, it would be a phenomenal thing to do for the residents and us, with the potential of maybe going down a little more if we get a large surplus. But Brian works on this stuff night and day. And every $68,000 in revenue that we bring in or decrease in an expense lowers the tax rate by a penny. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but you get a handful of those together, or 10 of them, and you decreased it substantially. So I'm happy with the budget the way it is, and we'll respect whatever your decision is on this graph, whatever way you want to go.
Thank you, Jim.
I would love to see the 1102, but I think it's extremely important to make, this is something you got to answer, that the 1105 will cover the potential increases to the employees, because they need to be treated fairly.
It's always a priority to treat them fairly, but it's also a priority to keep it balanced with the town. So that money that's left over with the 1105 gives us a cushion to negotiate in good faith. The 1102 really wouldn't.
No, yeah, I get that. Yeah, okay.
I would, I think the 1105 sounds great at this point, and still reserving enough for us to be able to negotiate in good faith. I think it puts us in a very strong financial position, and I really think that we've worked well together as a council and as a team with the staff here. So that would be my thought as well.
Thank you, Patty. For me, this is a no-brainer. Keeping the tax rate the same as it was in the prior year, that is a huge win. I just want to review the numbers quickly to talk about how it is that we can achieve that here. I know you reviewed it in depth in a lot of detail, but the main highlights here are in the current year, ending fiscal year 24 that we're currently in, we anticipate a budget surplus of $2.4 million. We are going to use $1.7 million of unassigned fund balance to put toward fiscal year 25 budget. So essentially, $700,000 of that surplus remains there to increase the unassigned fund balance. In addition to that, we have anticipated increases in revenue for fiscal year 25 of $700K. So those together allow us to keep the tax rate flat. Am I right?
Correct.
All right. This is huge. One of the few times, if ever, that I can remember being on the council, we were able to keep the tax rate flat year to year. So this is an opportunity that is excellent, especially with the potential for the town to carry heavy debt moving forward with the school project bond referendum upcoming. But this is a huge accomplishment here. Great job, Brian. Great job, Jim. Exciting time to be on the council.
I think also this really, for me, sort of brings home the point that we can never take our eyes off the ball. So this is a great accomplishment for us here tonight, but the council moving forward needs to continue to do this and adjust course over the next 5 years as we hopefully build the school, and going forward the next 300 years. You can't take your eye off the process. You have to follow and adjust and respond to the world and situations. So I'm just very optimistic and super excited and happy for the town with this.
It's great that we are able to do this. I just want to, in terms of connecting what you're saying, Patty, the debt service on the bond, our share would be $7 million. This amount that we're playing around with now is $700,000. So really, we would have to have 10 times the amount to sort of mitigate the impact. So it's great that we can do it. And even this $700,000 that's going to go back into the debt service, that's only 10% of what we owe for the mortgage on the project if it passes. So while it's great to do it, I don't know if it's not certainly scalable going forward. So and not that we couldn't come up with stuff, but there's a whole nother side, the whole school committee side, that would have to be agreeable and open to collaboration, because $7 million is a lot to just pay every year. So we would need willing collaborative partners beyond the 5 of us. That's how I see it. Like,
Absolutely.
Agreed.
Right? Do
Yes.
we all agree that?
We all agree.
And I am
think
It's not-
encouraged that they adjusted their budget under proposed amendment 1, if I'm not mistaken.
So I was
downwards.
talking, but
Sorry, go ahead.
So I'm just saying that the piece about collaboration, we can disagree sometimes. I don't know why I'm echoing. It's only me here. This is weird. Sorry, Brian. We can disagree sometimes, and we can negotiate, and there's 5 of us. We need the other 7 people on any future school committee to be willing to do that. Because we're adjusting with $700,000, we need $7 million every year for 20 years. So it's going to take a lot of hard work, hopefully not too many hard feelings, and we can move forward productively if that's where the community decides we go. That's all.
100%.
We agree?
We
Okay.
agree.
Thank you.
And I will say this is a good start to that. I would say being able to keep the tax rate flat, being able to have budget surplus is a good sign, showing that the town's operations are being managed efficiently. And on top of that, we know that the school department is anticipating a $1 million surplus for the current fiscal year. Another indication that they are running their operations efficiently. So we like to see that. So I'm happy to see these things happening at a time where we anticipate debt services that are very large to cover over the next several years, but good place to start now to get things going and hone in a bit. We just got to keep it going. Brian, you the man. Yes.
So I did also just want to highlight a couple of reasons that I am encouraged that we have achieved good cooperation with the school department in our, let's say, persistent messaging, that they have come back with $177,000 and a reduction in their budget. They also have used their $350,000 to get the project started with the architects. They've dedicated to using some of their fund balance towards CIP. And at the most recent meeting we had, we did discuss the 900,000 or $1 million that may be realized at the end of this year, and having those monies also put towards CIP needs. So I find that to be very encouraging. But again, Deb, just like you said, we got to just keep on the same path. You can't let up on any of it.
All right, this is a public hearing. So at this time, we are going to open it up. So anyone who wishes to speak on this matter, come on up. We're just going to ask you to introduce yourself. We'll limit you to 5 minutes.
Jim O'Neill, Wakefield. I've got 2 questions for Mr. Sylvia, Mr. President, and 2 for Mr. Kilpatrick. So why don't I start with Mr. Sylvia?
Go ahead, Jim.
All right, thank you. The debt service fund, $2.2 million you said was in that account. What does that account grow? What is that backing the outstanding $15 million we still have left on the debt account? What is that money, free radical? Can that be reduce budgets further? What do we have?
Sure. So actually, within the most recent audit of the town, so fiscal year 2023, the fund balance of the debt service fund was approximately just over $2.4 million. Within the current year that we're in, fiscal year 24, the town is using $150,000 of that fund balance to offset its debt obligations for the year, which is a similar practice that was done last year. So, and this was pre-me, but it's my understanding, former finance directors and former administrations from prior bond votes were say the debt obligations for the town on an annual basis was, give a number, say $2 million. The town was funding, say, $2.5 million to start to build up this fund balance for the prior bond vote and to have some funds set aside. Those funds remain for a future bond vote. So when we didn't have a bond to support, some of those funds were used to offset year-over-year general obligation debt of the town. And now, again, with the potential bond coming online again, those funds could be used to offset that bond. So it's built up over a number of years, as I understand it, from basically overfunding debt on an annual basis, and then they can be used either for new debt or for reducing the obligations on an annual basis.
But if the bond issue passes for the high school, it's included in that too.
It's the anticipation that would be used for that, yes.
Okay. All right, second question for you here. Just looking at the bank anticipation notes, particularly fiscal year 27, 28. Fiscal 27, you've got $2,550,000 that is an interest cost. Suppose the schools get back on track, need $1.2 million. Suppose the town needs $800,000. Those two together are $2 million. Added to $2.5 million or $4.5 million. Say we have a $80 million budget. What are we going to do about the state levy?
That was a lot.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
we're already there. If
Yeah.
the bank
Well,
anticipation
Jim, going outside the scope a little bit, public hearing related to the fiscal year 24-25 budget.
Okay, all right, okay. All right, we'll leave that. So I had a couple of questions for Mr. Kilpatrick. I think it's in his world here. The hold harmless funds, 34 million, 20 million is being used in this current fiscal year. So what's the effect on the school committee, even though this is not his budget, the fiscal year 24 budget, but what did it cost us this year? And with the remaining $12.5 million for fiscal year 25, what's it going to cost the schools next year?
Ryan, can you come on up for this?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Great question. Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Okay, so per the RIDE state aid documents, this year we received an offset of $298,767. I'm sorry, that will be for fiscal '25. So that's the hold harmless provision for fiscal '25. That number will be reduced to $83,075 next year. So that's a reduction of $215,692. So fiscal '25, we're receiving $298,767. For fiscal '26, that goes to $83,075. Fiscal '27, that goes to zero.
Okay, thank you. And the last question for you is, I was looking at the '24 budget, again, not your budget, but the question I asked last year of the former superintendent, and I found the paperwork again today, but my question was, we were showing 401.7 FTEs for fiscal year '24 in that past budget. My comment was,
Go ahead, Jim.
Jesus, that thing. 401.7 were filled, but he said we budgeted for 408.7, 7 more. So are those positions still unfilled, and what's the total dollars of those 7 folks in there? Do you know? I'm going back to not your budget, so if you don't have it, I'd love you to find it someday.
I don't have the dead-on accurate number in front of me, so
All right,
I'd prefer to give you the accurate information, if that's okay.
Okay, but it was an absolute quote. He said, we have filled 401.7, but we've budgeted at 408.7. So, I mean, 7 people could be $600,000 or $700,000 difference there.
Sure, yeah. We do not have 408 FTEs
Okay.
right now.
Yeah.
That's-
Yeah, I'm not trying to trap you here,
No,
but it's someone else's budget, somebody else's comments.
But I'm happy to get you that.
All right, but we, somehow or another, you can be able to find that out?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, great, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Brett Harrington, Wakefield. First of all, I'd like to commend our town manager here. We're lucky to have him. He does a heck of a job here, running this town lean. The main reason I came up tonight was prior meetings when we talked about what we were going to put on the town website for information. Clearly said that last slide was not going to be on the presentation because there was too much gray, it was hearsay, there was no facts to it. This is all, it doesn't matter now because the horse is out of the barn, but I've got my card here from the town talking about the question about the $150 million to finance the construction and equip of the new high school, athletic fields. Fine. Here's where I lose my mind. And other school facilities. If that's not vanilla, I don't know what is. And when I mean vanilla, people are going to look at that and say, well, $150 million is a lot of money. But it's going to not only do the new high school, it's going to help to do some of the work on the other school facilities. How do you read that any differently? That statement should have been left off. So that's in favor of the people that want to vote for the bond. The information that we were asking, that last slide might have been favor, that's a lot of money. So that's the question. Why was that put on the slide that way? What are you guys talking about when you say and other school facilities? Is that going to go? We talked about $32 million needing in repairs of the other schools. This bond doesn't address that number. So I'm just talking, I asked 3 of my friends, read this, and how do you make out of it? And they came out of the same thing. Well, they're putting money into other schools. No, they're not. So, and this is budget related. Me, Jim, and Doral were crucified when we got our referendum put together. How dare we? Matter of fact, one of the politicians, I'm not going to say her name because I was trying to find the article and I don't want to say the wrong person, but it is a fact, said that after we lost that 4-1, her response was, I hope they learned their lesson. Are you kidding me? Remember, guys, You're up there for all of us, whether you agree or don't agree, you want the school, you don't want the school, you're there for us. You have to speak for all of us, not just part of us. So, and ultimately, we were right. The number's not exact yet, but there was a surplus with the school. So we weren't going after something that wasn't there. But when we were getting spit at, flipped off, screamed at, yelled at the complex when they had that vote, that was great. As one of the three of us, that was great. Again, going forward, as you were talking, Deb, about the 700,000 is a nice number, but the 700 million or whatever it was that's going to come every year, yeah. There's no way, I mean, as taxpayers, I want to see that school ran like Jim's running his budget, very lean. I want to see the numbers. We can talk about the numbers. I want to see that there's 25 kids in front of every teacher. And if there's less than that, then we need a referendum. I didn't sign up for a private public school. I sent my kids to private school, but I didn't sign up for a private school here. I want that school, especially if this gets passed, I want people walking through those new buildings. If things need to be repaired, you need them repaired. We don't need to be in the same boat. You look at schools like Hendricken, they're older than our school, and they're in better condition. Why? Because there's maintenance that goes with those schools. But we get years of neglect, and this is what we're looking at. And people like to tell stories up here. You might say, well, why is he here? Okay? I know some of you people live on private roads. We've all heard that. Well, I live on a private road. And when you live on a private road, guys, and you don't have any kids in the system, like I said many times to you guys, I couldn't afford to live here when I was raising my family. I could only do that when I had one foot in the grave like I have now. Now I'm here. Anyway, I live on a private road. I have a private well, a private septic. There's no plowing, there's no nothing. I get absolutely nothing for town services. That's just the situation I'm in. Oh, 17 seconds. I'm usually here for 17 total.
All right, thank you.
So can we answer any of that? Do you want any answers or anything like that?
I didn't expect I was going to get it. To be honest with you, I welcome answers. I mean, if you want to say, why did they word it that way? That looks like there's other money going to other schools.
The question is, why was it worded the way it was on the postcard that was mailed out to households where there are registered voters in town? Jim, go ahead.
So, Luke Murray, who's been working on this project diligently, just texted me a few answers to that, but I'd rather just bring him up. Luke, come up, please, and he can answer any questions you might have, or you would direct him to have for the gentleman that just came up.
Good evening. So it's a pretty simple answer. That's exactly the way the bond legislation reads. So we take it from state law. That's what was proposed and passed. And when Sue and I collaborated on the postcard and the other flyers that went out, we used the exact language. Correct, Susan?
All right. Thank you, Luke.
The bond question has to be exactly the way that it is in the legislation on the ballot.
All right. Thank you, Susan.
Mr. Harrington, also, I did hear you say that you don't get any services or whatever, but we all have access to the library, to EMS, we drive on the town roads. We all might not be using all the same services all the time, but you do have the ability. We'll eventually all get to the senior center if we want. You can use Parks and Recs. All of those other services are open to all people, right? I'm not a kid in the school either, but we say this sort of government isn't a menu where you get to pick what you want. You provide all of those services to the community and you have access to them. And I mean, we know that EMS is great. We know, you're paying for the police response, you're paying for roads, so even though you might be on a private road and you don't get other amenities, you're still using the amenities that we have in the town.
All right, Doral.
Good evening. So I give you guys some stuff there. So this item here was a part of the school district's presentation last week, and it's on the transportation. So the district has been talking for some time about going to a two-tier system so that the high school and the middle school will just have their same buses, same group of kids, and then the elementary schools. So as part of the their report here, they had some negotiations with Ocean State Transit, and they determined that they would need a couple fewer of the largest buses and a couple less vans, or a couple less minibuses. So, but on page number 5, it's the last page, that's the page with the pricing. So the pricing you see on there, as far as I was able to determine, is what so they have, the way the contract is written now, which was signed in 2021, they can extend this current contract for 2 years. So the way it was presented was if they extend it, certain things happen and it keeps the price a little lower. So what you'll notice down there at the bottom, transportation for this year was 3.3 million, 3.5 next year, and 3.6 or 8 there for the last year. All right, those numbers are just for the AM and PM buses that go to the schools, and that's it. The rest of the money, so for this year, I believe the total cost for transportation was about 5.2 or 3 million. Next year, it's going to be 5.5 plus another 500,000 from something else. So that's like 6 million. So the rest of, the special needs buses and buses for kids going out of district, buses, the sports buses and everything else, when you add it all together, that's where you get the total number. But when you look at these numbers right here, what I want you to look at is this reason. This is for the three, as far as I know, this is still for the three-tier system. This is still for the three-tier system, which includes 360,000 miles a year. Now, if we go to 2 tiers, you're not going to have 360,000 miles driven. You're going to have some significant amount of less mileage driven, say maybe 100,000 less miles. So the likelihood is that when the final numbers come from Ocean State Transit, that the numbers that you see in their budget up to now is going to be somewhat less, maybe hundreds of $1,000s less. Now, that brings me to this piece of paper here. I took out a petition to change the property tax transfer to the schools by $1 million. And after I took it out on a Friday over the weekend, I decided to not submit it. Now, the reason I did that is because it's really not my job to be I don't have the fiduciary responsibility to monitor the school district's budget. That's your job. Now, after I sit down, I'm assuming that Mr. Kilpatrick will come up here and say something about this, but if I'm right, and there is going to be some significant savings when the contract is finally presented to the district, wouldn't you have liked to have known that before tonight? Now, you're the only, see, the town council is the only entity in town that can do anything about the budget. You said you've done a good job by keeping it level, but what if you could reduce the budget? What if you knew that if there was savings, that you could reduce the transfer to that amount to the schools this year, and it would actually lower our taxes? And if that became news before next Tuesday, it might help to pass the referendum. Now, finally, since you last met last week, here's a couple of things that have happened. The price of gasoline is going up 50 cents a gallon in 1 week. The people in the historic district, I don't know if this is affecting your buildings, and like this building, I don't know if it's affecting the town's buildings yet, but people in the historic district have gotten notices from their insurance companies that they've dropped them out of the blue, including Supreme Court Justice Delia. Now, they were with the company for like 35 years, got a notice, we're not covering you anymore. I talked to Jim O'Neill about this a couple of days later. He said somebody, a neighbor of his, had been with the same insurance company for 45 years, dropped him like a rock. I know for a fact, because my daughter and her husband live down in Snug Harbor, that insurance rates for coastal homes have gone up 20% since last year. So you have people that are wealthy, that are being affected by what's going on financially in this world. We have people on fixed incomes that are doubly hurt by tax increases when their fixed incomes don't keep up with inflation. So what I'm asking you is, maybe you should find out what the full story is. If I'm wrong, I've been wrong before, standing up here. And maybe it could get a little bit better. Thank you.
Thank you, Doral.
Mr. President, mind if I just address a couple of questions that came up about that? So Mr. Beasley's asked the staff, he's asked the council, he's asked the school department, he's come up with the same proposal. We did look into it. I don't want him to think we didn't. So, especially with the busing, the $6 million that they spend and what we could save. So would you mind if I just give you the numbers so that we can put it to rest?
Yep.
So, talking to the school department, there are 38 bus routes, but those are like double. So really, there's like 19 double routes, right? So you would there has to be 19 drivers, 19 bus monitors, but really you need more than that. Someone calls out sick, whatever. So you're going to need over 19. You're going to need probably 21 to 23.
Doral.
That's that. So even if you pay them with benefits and pay a modest rate, the benefits are what drives it really. You still spend $70,000 per person. It will come out to about $1.5 million just for the bus drivers, and that's only with 2 extras, and another $500,000 for the bus monitors, and that's with just a couple extras. The buses alone are about $350,000 each. And that would, there are benefits that the federal government could grants and so forth to get them, but that's a whole nother thing trying to get those. But and then you need a supervisor to watch this program. Then you need a mechanic to fix these very difficult electric vehicles. You're looking at about $8 million in infrastructure at a very conservative number, and probably $3 million a year for all the employees you'd have to hire. So I'm not saying I'm just saying for this town and the size of this town, that doesn't include fuel. I have no idea how much, we get a lot of variables. The other thing is, no matter where you look, it's anywhere from 20 to 40% of all these buses are down at some point. It's new technology. So 21 buses really won't do it. You probably need 25 buses. You can't leave a bus route open and just, So the only reason I'm bringing this up, we've looked into it on at least 2 occasions. It's cost prohibitive, and there's got to be a reason why everyone in the state hires that company that they hire.
All right, thank you, Jim. Dorald, can we leave it at that? You gave us
I just want to say
information.
one thing. I really, that's not what I'm talking about tonight. Right. I'm talking about the contract extension that the school district may sign in the next few weeks. And the cost of that contract extension, if it's significantly lower than what you see there on that piece of paper, then this town council should know about it. As far as the electric school buses go, once you own the infrastructure, once you own the buses, then your costs are your mechanic, your transportation person, and the people who are driving them. So I don't know let's just forget that tonight. I'm not talking about that tonight. I'm talking about that handout I gave you there.
All right.
Don't go anywhere, Mr. Beasley. So are you saying, regarding the $1 million, are you saying that you believe that they will eventually sign a contract after the budget is passed, which will result in a savings to their budget, $1 million savings in transportation?
No, I'm saying that if I'm correct in the way I looked at that handout, they, at some point, if the school committee votes at their next meeting to go to a 2-tier system, then when they go back to the Ocean State Transit for a new number for the cost for next year and the year after, that number may be significantly lower than what you see there on that paper where it says the 3.3, 3.4, $3.8 million. That may come down in amount. I'm not saying it's going to be $1 million. Could be 400,000, 600,000. I have no idea. But it should, you would think, if you only have a 2-tier system, you're going to go from 360,000 miles a year to something way less than that.
All right.
Thank you for explaining that. So, unfortunately, if they were to save any money, we have no ability to direct how that money is used or saved in what way, correct?
There are limitations provided by state statute that restrict how budget surplus can be used that are realized in the school budget. That's how I understand it. All right, Dorald.
Right, so what you're asking us to do is consider a reduction without them even knowing if they've had a reduction in their contract costs with Ocean State Transit.
Or to publicly negotiate against themselves at the microphone.
All right. We're still in public hearing. Anyone wish to speak on the budget? All right. Do we have to take a vote to close the public hearing? All right. Do I hear a motion to close the public hearing?
So move.
Second.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the public hearing is now closed. How do we feel on the budget?
I think we should adopt it. We should do 1105 and reserve the 203 for contract negotiations and then settle it all up out in June when we get the final figures based on whatever may change in the next couple of months.
So procedurally, to do that, we'd have to make a motion to approve the budget, including Amendment 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 as presented tonight?
Correct. I would just add one thing. If you are electing to adopt that 1105, leaving a balance for the contractual obligation of 203, that just needs to be assigned to an account. I would recommend the contingency account. That's unforeseen and unbudgeted expenses, which would be for contractual obligations, so I would just recommend that line.
We'll call that Amendment number 6?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'll move that we adopt the final budget with the 6 proposed amendments as stated in the slide, with a tax rate of 1105 as recommended by the staff.
All right, we got a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
We got a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Yeah,
Aye.
I have.
Oh, all right.
I wish this vote was split up into two, the municipal side and the school side. I think Jim and every department head has done a really good job controlling their costs. I think they're running extremely lean. On the school side, they closed 2 schools. They weren't able to fill some FTE positions, I believe, that's correct. You weren't able to fill some of the FTE positions?
That is correct.
And they still found no savings last year. Granted, it's level funded, but with closing 2 schools alone, that's $1.5 million. The number of employees that they weren't able to fill, I mean the FTEs that they weren't able to fill those positions, there's no savings there either. I can't go with this budget because both of them are combined. If they were split, I would have no problem voting yes for the municipal side, but not for the school.
I have no problem splitting it up if you want to do it that way. So let me start over. We'll start with approving proposed amendment number 1 as presented by the staff.
Okay, just to be clear, amendment number 1 accounts for the reduction in the school department's budget, which they approved at a vote that occurred prior to today.
Just 1 second. But we have a motion and a second on the floor, and then Mike is making
Yeah, I
another.
agree.
I feel
All
like
right.
we're creating craziness.
We're still in
Withdraw.
discussion. I'd rather continue with the motion that's on the table than to separate this. I think that only confuses the matter here.
Well, I gather Greg wants to sort of make a statement with respect to number 1, and kind of has, and that's fine. And then we can do the other 5 amendments separately, because that's all.
So you want to
the
take
town's-
each amendment in turn? I'm not sure that's what he's referring to.
No.
I'm not sure if you can split things up. I'm ignorant to this, to be perfectly honest. I don't know what is possible or it isn't as far as splitting things up. If you can split up the school and you,
You're talking
from
about
the municipality.
The property tax transfer. You'd rather take a separate
Okay,
vote on that.
property tax. If you can separate those 2 things, that would be great. If it has to all be voted as one budget, I understand.
I don't know about that.
Now I'm confused.
So, let's,
I'd rather vote on an all-encompassing budget and
I
vote
th-
on the amendments as they've been presented tonight and not veer off that for the purpose of just voting.
I don't think, I know what Greg would like. I don't know if that's actually possible because at some point, the town council has the responsibility to adopt the entire budget for the town, which will include the schools. So are you saying you would like to have separate votes and then a third vote would be the combined budget? I don't even know if you,
I don't know if you can split the budget. Like I said, I'm ignorant to this.
All right. How about this? Our first vote will be on approving the property tax transfer to the schools. How about that? That separates it out for us here. So,
That's page 19.
is that page 19?
Is that what we're? Proposed amendment number 1, which is $177,016 less. So that is number.
No, Patty, no, it's the same amount. They're just using their fund balance to supplement the budget. They're bringing money out of their quote-unquote piggy bank and just putting it into their operating budget.
Okay.
This doesn't change the transfer from the town to the school department. It simply reflects a change in the accounting by the school committee after the adoption of the preliminary budget by us.
Okay.
It's the same.
Yeah, I'd rather not veer off into this territory without legal
It
counsel
seems very
present to advise.
complicated.
So,
So I think if.
that
we-
motion's still on the table?
I know, so let's have a discussion. They'll just
Until
stay.
you revoke that, that's still here. We're still in discussion. As a motion is second, go ahead.
Okay. So what I'm hearing from Greg and hearing from maybe even Patty is that it's really important that elected officials responsibly spend taxpayer money wisely, right? Do we agree on that? We should all advocate for that. So Greg feels, it sounds like Greg feels that there's a way that they maybe have dollars that they're not using responsibly, or that they don't need all the dollars that they have. I'm speaking for you, sorry. But I think that's what you're trying to say, and I think there are pieces, we heard from Mr. Beasley, who said, you know, there's opportunities, he's believing in transportation to realize some savings. What's very frustrating is that it's hard to motivate other people to use the savings how maybe the majority here might want them to use them. So we can only speak in public and try to say, like, we might have a $7 million mortgage payment and we would like help. We don't want to, you know, we know 68,000 is a penny. $7 million is like $1. It's $1 to the tax rate to get $7 million. So we want the school committee to be responsible. If they're going to realize savings in transportation, what are they going to do with that? And what's hard is we don't have control over what they want to do with it. But I hear what you're saying, because that's what the community says is frustrated with. When they have extra money, they don't use it for maintenance, or they don't use it for this. We hear 10,000 things that they say. Everyone's a shoulda, coulda, woulda. But we still have to pass a budget tonight. We can talk about it and tell them our feelings and try to persuade and influence, but that's all that we can do, unless you want to propose a reduction. And the only mechanism at this point is a budget referendum, I believe, once it gets passed here.
Okay. All right. I do want to point out that the fact that a budget surplus exists or is anticipated to occur is a positive thing. It means that fiscally things are ran efficiently, such that there is leftover monies after all expenses budgeted for are spent. I mean, that's a positive thing. We want that. We anticipate the town to experience that. We anticipate the school to experience that. We want that. We don't want them to not have that. That would be a sign of poor fiscal management, and they would have to resort to ask us for increases, which they don't have to because they're in a good financial position such that they don't have to. And they're realizing income or a surplus, which is revenue in excess of expenses. But it sounds to me, Greg, like that you are not going to vote in favor of keeping the property tax transfer flat, which is the appropriation the town council gives to the school committee. Is that right?
The school committee, that's correct.
Okay. So I'd rather not veer off and take individual votes aside from what we've kind of been presented here, especially when our legal counsel's not here. I'd like to stay where we are. We have a motion, we have a second. Based on your thoughts, Greg, I don't think you're going to get behind what there's been a motion and a second for, because that entails in this whole budget a flat property tax transfer to the schools. Go ahead.
Well, just to counter your comment about a surplus is a good thing, some people could say, well, you're overcharging me, right? So you've overcharged to create this extra amount of money. So in some places, a surplus might be not a good, like that's the opposite argument, right? So you're saying it's a great thing, half full, we've spent your money wisely, and the opposite person could say, no, you've just taken too much of my money and you don't need it. So that's what Greg is saying. I think he's saying we're giving too much. It's not that they're efficient, it's that we're constantly giving them more. It's just that's how I'm summarizing his opinion. I'm just reflecting back what I'm hearing.
Okay. All right. We can agree to disagree. Go ahead.
Just to be clear, Jim, your explanation for the 700,000 or 660,000 of it was essentially found money that the state owes us.
Yeah, that was revenue that came in that was not anticipated. We didn't count it because we didn't think it was coming, but it came, and the minute it came, we recalculated everything, and Brian worked on a chart. But the other argument that Councilmember Bergen is bringing up is the surplus of, possibly 2.4 million. All I could say to that is that we work very hard for surpluses and for additional revenue. Like I said, the tax assessor's been working really to speed this up, to find out what additional revenue we could bring to the town. And so we just come up with the numbers, and you guys figure out what you want to do with it. So I'll leave it at that.
You know, I think that we as a council have really, really put a lot of pressure on you and the town staff to run operations as tightly as possible. And to that end, I know that you're very involved in each expenditure. And, you know, I think I understand what you're saying, Deb, that, you know, there is a perception that maybe it's a bad thing, but in my estimation, it's really a positive thing. And it's, you know, speaking in terms of the school, I find it very encouraging that with you know, the surplus that has been applied to the things, as I've said before. And I feel as though we've been negotiated with in good faith, and I feel that we're sort of at a good point to go forward. So I feel optimistic. I know that there's been a lot of, you know, there's a lot of history when it comes to this, and so it's a touchy subject. So that's pretty much all I have to say.
So I will say, like I said 2 weeks ago, in 2020, when the school department saved $1 million in transportation, that was this whole discussion. That's how we got to 55.9, because we could have given them 54.9, and they could have used that savings for the buses. And that referendum didn't pass by 34 votes. They were still going to get 55.9, but since they held 100, we were only, the referendum was to only transfer 54, right? That referendum failed by 34 votes. They kept the $1 million, and that's how they've had this amount since 2020. Again, Dorald is saying there's potential identified savings coming from the school side. Their budget's perfectly balanced right now. They're going to then realize a $300,000 or $400,000. I'm just taking what he said and just repeating it. They're going to realize a savings. We cannot decide, we five cannot decide that $400,000 should go towards the $7 million mortgage. They could decide to buy, I don't know, shrubs, I don't know, plantings, who knows, anything they wanted. And that, I feel, Greg is speaking for the community when it's frustrating, because we might say we wouldn't spend our money that way. We would pay down the mortgage. We would contribute to the mortgage.
We would pay the CIPs.
Right.
Well,
So, I mean, that's what they're doing with it.
He's just saying what people say. When you have extra money, when you save money, do you go on a vacation, or do you say, let me pay down my bills?
And pay down you
Well,
put a new roof
let's
on your
not
house if you have extra money.
I'm
Like,
just trying to explain what I think Greg is
I mean,
saying.
well, I think
and what
Greg
Dorald
should
is
say what he
saying.
says, what he
All right,
wants to
all
say.
right. You want to
for
say anything here?
himself.
Yeah, well, basically what I'm saying is I think the school, the ideal thing would be to hire a consultant, to have them go through and help them find ways to save. It was talked about, I think 4 or 5 years ago, a school committee member said that that's what they were going to do. I don't know if it was done, but here we are. We have the same discussions every year. Closing 2 schools and not having any savings to speak of, and not being able to fill all the teaching positions, which frees up more money, that's not running efficiently.
All right. We all have different opinions. We can all disagree on certain things here. I mean, from my perspective, they realized about $250,000 in a budget surplus for the fiscal year ending last year. They anticipate a budget surplus of about $1 million for the fiscal year ending in 2 months. So, I mean, they are showing signs of sort of reining it in to an extent. I know that there's also, closed certain schools, so you expect a certain dollar amount. There's obviously different varying expenses in the budget to offset that to an extent, but I think they're doing a good job. I'm happy with what they've been presented, especially recently, and I think this is a good opportunity to move forward. This is positive, being able to keep the tax rate flat as compared to last year. I don't think we've done that in my tenure on the council, so I'm happy we're able to achieve it tonight if we can pass this. I think this is a positive thing moving forward, especially in light of the potential debt service associated with the high school project that may or may not pass. But I think we should, not get into such, how are we going to do this, how are we going to do that? This is a positive thing we're able to achieve tonight, and that's step one forward toward going forward. That's how I view this.
I agree.
Anything? Anyone else?
I think it's important to celebrate the victories when you have them. There's a lot of challenges, but this to me is a really good thing that we're going to be able to deliver to the taxpayers. And, I'm happy about it myself personally. Glad that the taxes are going to.
All right, there's a motion and a second on, and just to remind everyone, we're voting on to pass the budget as it's been presented tonight to include the 5 amendments presented there and the 6th amendment, which is to allocate that $203,000 to a contingency line item.
Yeah, I agree. Greg, I'm going to vote, I'm planning to vote to pass this, but I'm going to encourage you and everyone here, you are advocates, you can use your voice to sway and move opinion, and I think bringing the conversation forward about how to use your savings, where that savings gets used, we're all serving until November. We can continue to use our voices to do that, because no matter what, we represent the community, and that's things that people say. And so you need to sit here and bring that forward to the school committee, that there's 32,000 people here and not just 2,000 kids in the district, and go forward and make changes. Because if the bond passes on Tuesday, a week from tomorrow, there's going to be we're going to have a big, huge hill every year to climb. And so if that's the case, we would have to work together, because pushing it all onto the taxpayer is frightening and scary. So I wouldn't do that. I want to look for other ways, and some of that has to come from the school department.
Yep.
So use your voice when you can.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Let's go.
All right, let's take the roll.
Councilmember Bergner.
Aye.
Council Vice President Marin.
Aye.
Councilmember Alley.
Aye.
Councilmember Sweet.
Nay.
Council President McEntee.
Aye.
The ayes have it, 4-1.
All right, thank you, Susan.
Motion to adjourn.
We got a motion
Second.
to adjourn. Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?